we are all made of star stuff. Every atom in our bodies, everything we've ever touched, seen or heard of was once part of the stars. Over billions of years, we've evolved into lush, diverse, strange and beautiful creatures just on this one floating blue ball we call home. We're all unique. But what makes us this way? DNA. It is the code that identifies us. Any slight deviation in DNA makes the difference between you. For millennia, we've relied on nature to write our code. We have evolved over time. Species that best adapt to changing circumstances have survived. We are beyond survival. We thrive. We all have our own DNA. It is our core beliefs, values, and principles, our code. How do we thrive in this ever-changing digital era? Like nature, we help you maneuver through challenges and seize opportunities of the ever-changing external ecosystem. We help you rewrite your code, so you don't just explore, do, or become digital. You are digital. We are engineered to thrive. After all, we are made of star stuff. So, how will you rewire your DNA?
What makes you tick? What makes me tick? Code, biological code, nature's embedded software that is in any muscle, any cheek, any bone, in your heart, and even into your heartbeat itself. Just imagine that here and now you would command your heart to stop beating altogether. It would not comply. Why not? Because it was programmed not to comply. It was programmed to scale up when you're taking an exercise, or to slow down when you're taking a nap, and probably to overperform when together with your partner you're in the act of creating your next generation DNA. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the power of DNA. It is in your body, it is in my body, it is in any body. So just imagine there would be such a thing as a digital DNA. Just imagine that companies could identify those skills, those technologies, that business model that in the right combination could stop your corporate company's heartbeat from ticking altogether. Or, to look at the bright side of life, if we could really program the way a company operates, that people do the right thing because the technology helps them to do the right thing. Wouldn't that be, as Americans say, awesome? Good afternoon, Amsterdam. And welcome. Thank you. Welcome to my native city. My name is Hans van Gieke, and I run the research for Deloitte in this part of the world, in EMEA. I joined Deloitte August 1st, 2016, coming in from the Office of the CIO research team in Gartner. My role is to do two things. First of all, to produce research together with colleagues across the world. And the second part of my role is to make sure that we discuss that research. And that's why I'm here. I do this across the world, in different continents, with different companies. And so I'd like to share with you today some of our research as it relates to low code. Now, my normal environment, you might say, is these conferences. And here's a typical example. Only 3 weeks ago, I had the privilege of being the opening speaker for the Global SME Finance Forum. It's all about financial inclusion, but it's also about the way in which banks are fundamentally changing their technology operating model. And what became evident from that conference, and the example from India from my previous speaker was a typical manifestation of that, big banks cannot support SME clients with the technology stack that they have in place. And so a lot of them are investing a lot of money to move from this monolith into what you could call a Lego-based type of approach. You have components, and those components are, from an architecture point of view, isolated. They are Lego blocks, and that allows the financial services institution to service others that want to open up their bank. That was actually the central theme of the Global SME Finance Forum. It was all about what they call real-world players, retailers, telco operators, manufacturing companies that using low-access technology start their own bank, start their own financial services organization. And so for a lot of organizations, this is a true goal. And since my, let's say, natural audience is the CXO level, CEOs, CIOs, allow me, for those of you that are more on the programming side of the equation, to share a metaphor that you might want to use when you talk to your board. Use the aircraft carrier. They will understand. First of all, the aircraft carrier is exposed to the elements. It is a potential big target. But the most important one is the CIO, the captain, is not responsible for the decision, whom are we going to attack? That is a political decision to make. The captain is responsible to run a tight ship. And a tight ship means that the politicians, or in the case of a business, the CEO and his or her team, need to decide what capabilities should that future aircraft carrier have. One is the obvious one. Dramatic reduction of complexity by decommissioning old aircraft. They're flying around, they're about to go out of petrol, they will fall into the ocean. 20 instances of SAP. What planet are you from? Change. Second one, whilst we're doing that, the business says, I want the latest and greatest because I'm exposed to these new things like drones. Why the hell want drones? Well, everybody has drones, so I want drones. Okay, drones. We'll add drones. And whilst we're doing that, the existing business in which they would fly in horizontally and they would fly out, depart horizontally as well, is changing as well. If you do this 100 times a day for a year, it'll burn itself through the platform because the platform was not designed to do this. Metaphor being that even the current business is not really serviced by the technology stack that you have. And whilst we're trying to get our head around, the past, the future, and the current, we're changing the rudder, as in we have a different strategy. We're changing the propulsion system, as in we're going to go to low code and cloud. And above all, as a result, we change the configuration of the crew. We need a different crew. So, to have a conversation about digital transformation, this is a metaphor that in my experience works well. Most board or shareholders that I have the privilege to talk to across the world have a dream of what tech could look like. And it would be something like this: a solid, future-proof core that can be able to scale quickly speedboats, and those that work we will put on the platform, and those that don't work we can afford to lose. That's the strategy. Now, translating that to our world in tech, a colleague of mine and I wrote a piece of research, which if you send me an email, happy to share with you, or go to my colleagues in the booth of Deloitte, which starts from a premise. And the premise is, there will be new technology. Whether you get it, whether you can afford it, it's irrelevant. There will be new technology. And so every time you are confronted with this difficult trade-off, what am I going to do with this? And when we look at our clients across the world, and as you might know, Deloitte's quite a big player in this field, we see four manifestations of maturity. The one is exploring, just trialing stuff. It doesn't really lead to anything. Second one is doing. Nothing changes in the business, but we have a nice app and a nice website. And the more you move to the right, it moves to becoming, as in less siloed and more advanced changes to the current business model. Or being, really have DNA that is inherently digital. And so for those of you that represent relatively big organizations, the risk that I'm sure you will recognize is this one. You create an illusion of being digital, but really you're not. It's quote unquote digital window dressing. And so we at Deloitte define digital transformation as the future proofing of a business, of an organization, by putting digitally enabled business relevant offerings into the market. And now is what is really different, rapidly, successively, at scale. For those in this room that have been in this industry somewhat longer, like myself, you could argue, what are you talking about? When SAP came around, that was new too. I remember, so that gives you an indication of age for the Dutch ones. At Volmac in 1990, I said, we need to go to Waldorf. And they go like, what? Waldorf. What the hell is in Waldorf? Well, it's a small new company. It's called SAP. Might want to talk to them. Right. In other words, you could argue this is of all times. Internet, web, changes of all times. And we felt that there is 9 shifts that are changing the way in which we scale technology. On the left hand is what any board will agree. It must be faster, it must be a machine, and it must be scalable and secure by design. And meanwhile, in the cellar, there's a team. We close the door, we open up the hatch, we threw in a sandwich, and we said, cheaper and shut up. It's called the IT department. And this mismatch is just fundamentally not acceptable. Because any business will be digital. You cannot live like this. You should not accept an aircraft carrier that is split in the middle. And so we created these 9 shifts that I want to walk you through, relating them obviously to the low-code approach, and in this particular case to Outsystems, who's a really good partner of ours in Deloitte. So on the left-hand side, you see the characteristics of what we feel is different in running tech. It should be rapid, it should be successive, and it should be scalable in design. On the right-hand side, you find the topics that we in Deloitte, when you read our tech trends, happy to share that with you too, we feel will be more or less topics for the coming 5 years. The move from digital experience towards digital reality, Internet of Things, augmented reality, digital twins. The move from data analytics, BI, data lakes, to cognitive, AI, self-reasoning, deep learning. And finally, the move from cloud to platforms. So on the right-hand side in this model, you see represented those forces that are, you could say, to a degree, beyond your control. They will happen, whether you get it or not. On the left-hand side, you see the characteristics of the function. Whether it lives in IT or in the business, it's irrelevant. It's a function to make sense out of information, out of data. And in the middle, you find what we have called the boosters and the showstoppers that might help you. Let me take you through one. Just suppose we would say, I'm too slow. Okay, then a DevOps approach using agile methodology would be a useful focus area to become faster. I'm sure all of you would agree. That would become even better, dear board, if you would choose to go for a cloud-first strategy. Oh yeah, we want to do that. That's 20 million. Do you still want it? Okay, all right. Because once you do that, you can scale. And moreover, you get access to an ecosystem of other players that have really interesting innovation that you don't have to build yourself. It's already there in the public cloud. Let's just realize that 60% of what you could call innovation technology nowadays is only launched in the public cloud. So not being there is more or less accepting that you're not going to innovate for the coming years. So far, so good, because that ecosystem will help me to become successive. But moreover, there is a few showstoppers. There's no free lunch. If currently 20% of your IT team is in patching and in security work that can be robotized, it's not going to fit. And moreover, if there's a culture of keeping the lights on and no experimentation because it will harm your career, that's not going to fit. And if you're going to go for agile ways of working and you still fund technology as if you have done always, program management, owners of applications, don't even bother. It's not going to fly. So, allow me to walk you through a moment through this model through the lens of Outsystems. Now, this is almost going to sound a bit like a sales pitch. It's not meant to be, but I really asked myself the question, being one of the authors of this stuff, where would Outsystems help me to become better, to digitally transform? And there you have it, in just about any dimension. So let me walk you through each of them. Agile ways of working, moving to DevOps over time. This is the way we see this. And the way we see this is you put in place a machine that is capable of, first of all, identifying the environment in which you're going to operate, and then using sprints, create next propositions in the market that you test and that either live or die. The whole approach, agile approach, can be very well supported by the way in which we work with the Outsystems platform. You could almost say it's made for it. The second one, close to that too, is obviously that it becomes rapid as a result because of this fact of fast-moving experimentation. So we, as a firm, as Deloitte, being one of the partners of Outsystems, feel that it makes no sense. And I see these clients, I want to be very clear about this. We see clients across the world, yeah, we'll do a few proof of concepts with Outsystems. Don't bother. It's too expensive. Don't do it. It only makes sense when Outsystems becomes an industrialized part of the aircraft carrier. And not just a hobby of 3 people in the cellar. It should be a machine that creates measurable business value. Now, here's another dimension to that. So our solution, but again, there's many other suppliers here. I'm sure we're not the only one, but we've been a partner for Outsystems for more than 10 years, so I think we more or less got to understand each other. This is how we do that. So we put in place a process supported with tools that allow you every 2 months to start a new chain of trial and error in order to become better and moreover deliver measurable business value. This is all about successively. This is what successively means. Not one proof of concept of a new app. It's a continuous machine that evolves and learns, particularly based on data coming back from clients. Let's go to at scale. So scaling is obviously very important. And one element that we see there, I'm sure some of you will recognize, is that boundaries between business and IT are blurring, as a result of which tech fluency is crucial for everybody involved and not just for the tech people. So we see in our research that that is one of the areas where Outsystems is extremely well positioned, because it supports a new type of employee that we see emerging across the world. We call them purple people. They have an in-depth understanding of a business. They know how to run that business, but they also have an in-depth understanding of the supporting technology. That's what makes them relatively expensive, but also really effective. And it's not by surprise, obviously, that the Outsystems platforms delivers powerful tools. One of them is obviously the interface and the coding capability itself, in the hands of purple type of people, can make a true difference. And then we go to a big showstopper in a lot of cases. The configuration of the current workforce. On average, when we look across the world, and we have detailed information about this, but just in summary, 20% of your current IT team, when you are a relatively old and classical aircraft carrier, 20%, the gray one on the left, will not make it because their skills are just not in demand anymore. Then there's about 10 to 15% that will not make it either, but in this case, the reason is that their attitude, their way of working just not fit the speed and the taste for experimentation of the new aircraft carrier. And then hopefully you will sift a substantial group of that part to the new world, and you being here, I'm sure you are already in that space, but I'm sure you would also agree that there's still a lot of vacancies that will grow over time the coming years. So block number 4 is all about what is your current, let's say, need for technology, and what will that look like the coming years? And if there's one thing I could suggest to you is create this list. Happy to help. New roles, evolving roles, declining roles. And on top of that, ask yourself the question, if that new aircraft carrier with its definition of what it should look like, which is something you really have to think about, if we envision that, what of those capabilities should I have myself, as in own them, employ them, and which one can I bring in from the outside, the likes of Deloitte or some of our colleagues here? I recently did this with a huge insurance company, and it will have come as no surprise that a total of 60% of the picture changes because you fundamentally redesign the aircraft carrier. And this is then eventually what that boils down to. What will be your future, quote-unquote, shopping list? Let's go to another one. I will share the research with you guys, don't worry. Keep on making pictures. Go to the next one. If we do all that fancy stuff, we invest heavily in the Outsystems platform, we build capability, we have smart people, but we leave the governance and the funding the same, don't bother. It's not going to work, at least not to the potential of how it could work. Let me just walk you through this one as well. We as a research firm within Deloitte, we do research amongst CIOs. And so across the world, the average CIO spends 56% of his budget on keeping the lights on, 26% on incremental change, no real change, and 18% on business innovation. Those CIOs, however, or corporate digital officers, that are top of the bill, we call them digital vanguards, only spend 33% on keeping the lights on, 29% on improving, but a staggering 38% to try new stuff. Oh, and between you and me, those are the boys and girls that makes the most money. And in some cases, a lot of cases, they are actually board members because the firm identifies this as the crucial element of the war which will come, which is the capability of the aircraft carrier. And so when your current funding model is something like this, program management, build, run, application owners, you will never ever going to fund an end-to-end customer journey or a straight-through process. So please talk with your management, and particularly the CFO. If you want the value out of Outsystems, address this as well. It's crucial to be successful. Now, I'm not going to dwell on the technology forces because my estimate from this audience is you will be very well aware of this. I just want to take out one because it's such a big one. It's the move to cloud and platforms. When we look at the financial industry for a moment, so I'm going back to this conference that I did 3 weeks ago here for the World Bank. These are the forces in the financial services industry, according to our research, that's what our clients tell us, why they are moving to cloud massively. And for good reason. Obviously, one is digital and ability and productivity. 40% of banks are adopting cloud to automate and streamline delivery services. 31% are doing it for cost reduction. No surprise. Risk perception of this move is reducing as well. So there's a growing belief, and in the case of Outsystems, you should be convinced of that, that this is a safe investment to make. But by far the most important one is this. I want to have a different battleship, because the current tech battleship just does not support the next war that I'm going to get into, whether I like it or not. Read it on the bottom here. Cloud-enabled organizations, according to our research, see a 60% improvement in net profit margin over the industry average. Do you have any questions, CEO? And so, when we look at this from a broader perspective, which is my job, I'm definitely not a specialist in Outsystems. Here's some of the reasons why. Here's some of the areas: rehost, refactor, retype, and here's some of the numbers. 50 to 60% reduction of infrastructure management jobs, 30 to 40 quality assurance and testing, and the list goes on and on. If you do it right, you can fund your innovation by cost reduction. And then, obviously, it becomes extremely important. This is a bank with 1,100 applications. Where do you start? Where do you put the focus? Where does a low-code platform such as Outsystems add the most value? Because it's a daunting task, as John already mentioned also from Forrester. So have a look at this video and tell me what strikes you.
Playing jazz.
Playing jazz.
Smoothie.
Making smoothie.
Calendar.
No meetings today. Remember, dentist at 9:30.
Fire off.
Fire off.
Open door.
Door open.
And we're gonna do one more.
Oh yeah. Open door.
Wrong voice command.
Open door.
Wrong voice command.
Open. Open door.
Repeat that.
Open door.
I didn't understand that.
Hey, open door.
Play on the floor.
Get over the door. Open the door.
Wrong
Open
voice
the door. Higher.
Higher volume.
Higher.
Higher.
Obviously, it was after lunch, so I thought I'd wake you up. But there's actually a serious question behind this. How many platforms did you see? Just replay it one. I'm not going to ask you now, we don't have the time, but security, open door. Internet of Things, smoothie. Music, temperature. You saw a total of 6. Voice. So in our private lives, we are more or less accustomed to the fact that the value that we experience, temperature goes up, doors open or not, is delivered in a fundamentally different way when it comes to the underlying technology. It's platforms. So the first question that I always ask any board that I meet for a big firm, what's your platform strategy? What do you mean? Could Outsystems be a powerful tool to support a platform strategy? Let me tell you why this is so relevant. Why Deloitte as a consulting firm is hired across the world to help create new banks, new retailers, new what have you. It's because of this. When you are in products, the value that Wall Street will pay for your firm is 1 times revenue. That's what, we're auditors, so we can count. 1 times revenue. When you are in services, 2 times revenue. When you make sense out of huge chunks of data and turn them into actionable information, 4 times revenue. But when you are in platforms, 8 times revenue. And now comes the really interesting part from the mouth of the researcher himself.
Now, if you climbed behind the research, what you'd find is that the bottom left is 1 to 2, the bottom right is 2 to 3, 4 to 5, 8 to 15, and beyond. So very strong correlation to the type of business model that someone uses. And in fact, we've done the research that can take two companies in the same industry, providing kind of the same thing, but using two different business models, both about the same size, and both delivering the same pre-tax profits. But with two different business models, their valuation is a difference of $100 billion in one example.
So why don't you go back to your board and tell them, with Outsystems, we could consider to build ourselves a platform strategy. It's not just relevant to run our business, it is, but it's much more relevant because it will raise the stock price of the firm. How about that? And even in those cases, the same service, but different as a platform, delivered as a platform, 15 times revenue. Even for companies that don't make money. Uber. Think about that. So, this platform approach is important, and it's number 9, but there's one, as you saw, which is green, for which Outsystems is not going to help you. Moreover, if you do not address it, don't even bother to buy Outsystems. And that is all about digital DNA. Together with MIT Sloan for 6 years, 7 already, we as Deloitte do research on the non-techie part of digital transformation. The things that we know are very important: leadership, risk appetite, investment, recruitment. And when I joined the firm coming from another research company, Gartner, I was confronted with this data set. And so together with my team, we started to cluster the questions, 58 questions, 4,000 companies. Okay, any question about investment? That's a DNA. Do you invest? Risk, okay, do you want to take risk? Leadership, is there leadership? And after doing this, we identified a total of 13 DNA components. Now remember what I said about the heart, right? You can say to your heart, stop beating, but it will not comply because it was programmed not to comply. Same's true for DNA in your company. You can say, I want open leadership, but it's not going to happen overnight, so you have to choose. And so what we did is what we probably advise you as a client to do as well, which is, you have data, you might want to have a look at the data. So we analyzed the data and we asked ourselves what works and what doesn't work. Where do companies that fundamentally digitally transform put their investment when it comes to the non-techie part of the transformation? And here's what we found. First one, laggards. Proper English word would be oblivion. They don't know where they are, they don't know where they're going to. Then there is chasers. There might be some chasers in this room, actually. They still don't know where they are, but by God, they have the money to find out. They are any consulting firm's dream. And then there's 2 that actually do work, but they are fundamentally different, and they have a strong relationship with Outsystems. The first one, we call them talent. Let me see which one. Yep, fast-moving experimenters. These are companies that have a taste for appetite, taste for risk, but they mitigate the risk by keeping the number high, but the initiative small. So on average, you're talking about 60 digital initiatives at the same time. Small speedboats. If they live, we scale. If they don't work, we kill. The top characteristics of the leadership is to kill stuff at a rapid pace. Outsystems would be perfect. You could even say there's not really long-term thinking. They are very open to try new stuff, new technologies. They evolve as they go. And then the other successful one, fundamentally different, is what we call talent and strategy leaders. They know what insurance will look like in 10 years or 5 years. They have a strategy, and they translated that strategy in a maximum of 5 initiatives, which are carried by a huge investment in new talent, plus 36%, not forgetting to train the existing workforce, because you don't want to have A and B people. People should be on par in terms of their capability. And here also, strong leadership to support this. So we as Deloitte position ourselves as a partner for Outsystems to help you not just create the technology, which in itself is powerful, but to embed it in such a way that it becomes a repetitive machine. As you remembered from my opening statement, what is different? Rapid, successive, at scale. After 2 years, you should be able to do this yourself as a firm, putting in place the right aircraft carrier that it needs and having had the discussions that come with those choices. Because if there's one thing that I've learned from running mutual of these workshops with big firms across the world is for the gain, you need to take the pain. And there will be pain. Going back from 20 instances of SAP to 1, saying goodbye to a percentage of your current workforce, heavy investment in recruitment, and so on. There is no free lunch, I'm afraid. All this talk about digital, at the end of the day, can only make sense if it makes sense in the eyes of the business, if it is business relevant. So let me finish my contribution today with a video that I think clearly expresses what that means.
Emma. Huh? Emma. 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 Emma.
That was fantastic. Thank you, Hans.